Hi, welcome to Procom's Facebook Live. Once again, we're here with Andrew Wall and CA4IT. So we'll be live once again, hopefully on both the Procom Facebook page and Andrew's personal page. So if for whatever reason we get disconnected on one, feel free to click into the other and you'll be joining the live conversation. Today, what we're going to talk about is who needs to be part of your team. And I think for most people who saw our Facebook advertisement on this, you don't bring in an electrician to do your plumbing or vice versa, because everyone has their own expertise that they can bring to your team, and you want to make sure you have the right people there. Mm-hmm. So this is what Andrew and I thought would be valuable to talk about today, because we really felt that, sometimes people are going and asking those questions to the wrong people, and it's really not setting your business up for success.
Absolutely. I think building a team to support you and help your business succeed is essential. I think a lot of people think that they can't because they're maybe a small business or can't afford it, but it's not a full dedicated team. It's a team on demand. So you bring in those resources when you need them, but you need to have them sort of set up so that you know who to go to when you have these problems. And there's a few key players. You got to have your starting lineup. Which obviously I'm biased. I think you need to have an accountant. You also need to have an insurance provider. I think that's pretty important for people these days, and understanding the different types of insurance and how they're going to be a factor in your business as well as your personal life. And a good lawyer to look at and vet your contracts. If you're in the consulting world, a good agency and a good recruiter who can make sure that you've got that next contract coming up for renewal. These are all important team members that are going to help support you in your business and help you grow.
Yeah, and I'm sure similar to us, we receive questions all the time about, should I incorporate? Should I be a sole proprietor? Should I be a temp employee? Like, how should I engage as part of my business? And although, we have some, we talk to Andrew all the time and what we believe is the right situation, we're not experts, and we definitely don't want to steer you down the wrong path depending on what your goals are for this contract. Are you planning to become a full-time employee down the road? Is this just a temporary situation for you? Is this something you want to do long-term? These are things that an accountant is better off to tell you how you should structure this, and depending on I guess really how you want to work in your career. Because incorporating is not a short-term decision. It's not something you do for a 3-month opportunity. It's something that we want to make sure that, on the advice of an accountant, that you're really looking at this longer term as something that you want to do.
Yeah, and that you're making an informed decision.
And you're making an informed decision. You're not just going on the internet and setting up a company. As Andrew said last month, there's a lot of things that you can do wrong when you set up your own company that will plague you for years to come.
Absolutely. And in fact, many times we have to go back and dissolve that corporation and start from scratch because it's easier than fixing the problems that were created from day one. And I think, getting set up from day one is so important. And oftentimes it doesn't happen because maybe there's a contract and we have an urgent demand to just get things closed, so we go online and we process it as quickly as possible without thinking it through and setting it up properly, and setting up not just the accounting but the whole process. Like you really should have a professional profile, should be on social media, LinkedIn, have a professional profile there. You should have a website ideally. You should have business cards. You should have letterhead. All these things that help when we talk about personal services corporation and the risk there. We want to make sure that we're setting up our business for success, making sure that we have the resources available, and figuring out what is the best plan for us individually. Because like you said, if I'm going on this in a 3-month contract, incorporation may not make sense, but there's a possibility that it might, because maybe I'm taking a 3-month contract, but after I've done that 3-month contract, I might want to be working on a sideline business that I've had in my head for years. Maybe I've got a spouse who's a high income earner, and all this income is going to be able to flow into the corporation as part of our savings, and we want to build up a corporation as not only an operational business in the short term, but maybe a holding company in the long term that's going to hold a bunch of assets towards my retirement. And there's lots of different reasons that it might make sense. So having a conversation with an accountant to understand, what are the pros and cons, how is the best way to structure it, and what's right for my personal situation. And that's, I think, a really important step. And again, like you said, calling in the appropriate advisors, whether that be an accountant, an insurance provider, a lawyer, that's really important. And especially speaking, I guess, to the recruiters who might be watching. I think that there really is sometimes you want to help your independent contractors. You want to help your applicants, and so sometimes you just want to give them the quick answer and feed them along the process, and that can really work to your detriment sometimes because number one, you don't want to be taking on the risk of providing financial advice. Number two, you might not be aware of all the implications of the information. Maybe you've got a little bit of a tidbit from the lunch and learn sessions, the information that we've gotten to, but there might be other aspects that you may not be aware of or may not understand fully.
Well, I think I'm going to use your pet phrase. Everyone's personal situation is different and has to be evaluated differently because of their personal situation, based on what they're looking for in their career, based on their financial standings, and it really makes a big difference. But I think as part of that, you also brought up another person that you probably also want part of your team is someone to help coach you in your social media, someone to help you. And again, this isn't going to be someone who's full-time part of your team, but hey, do you have somebody that knows how to set up a great LinkedIn profile? Do you know somebody who's LinkedIn's constantly changing things, and if you don't know about some of the new things that LinkedIn has done for contractors, they've added an ability for you to mark yourself as a contractor. They've added the ability for you to say whether you're available or not. Most people probably don't know this. It came out late last year, and if you don't know those things, who's going to be that person that's going to coach you through those changes that are happening on social media and things that you may want to do at social media, but also setting up your website. Who's going to help you set up your website? Are you setting up your website? Do you have the skills to do that and to keep it current and updated? Are you using a templated website tool like Squarespace or any of the other ones that are out there, WordPress? And then who's going to help you with that content on that? So do you have someone helping to provide content? Are you creating content for it? Or is it just a shell website that you want to keep up so that your business is visible and
as a professional brand and a professional image. Yeah.
Right. So there's obviously a lot of again, these are not full-time people on your team, but you may have somebody who helps you with your website.
Absolutely. And at the bare minimum, knowing where to go to for the right resources. So maybe it's as simple as having a conversation with someone who knows this field, who can guide you to where to go so that you can self-serve. But without having that initial conversation with someone who knows and understands the field, there's a lot of really useful information on the web. There's a lot of really unuseful information on the web.
Or bad information.
Or bad information, just flat out incorrect, right? So you want to make sure that if you are going to self-serve, that you know where to go and what are the resources that you can trust.
Absolutely. I mean, the APCC website is a very good website for contractors. It's there and meant for contractors. So it's really important, I think, if you are a consultant, that you familiarize yourself with it, because it does give a lot of information for those independent contractors out there that, about insurance, about accounting. And that is a place where that information has been vetted before it's going up there. So you're not just Googling tax advice 2017 and hoping that good things are going to happen to you this year.
Right.
You want to make sure that you're connecting with people that the association has vetted and believe are good people that you should be working with.
And relevant to your jurisdiction too, right?
Right.
Because that's a whole other aspect. That obviously, when we go out into the web, there's so much content that is U.S. based, and that can really mislead you, particularly from the tax stuff as far as what you can do. And I've seen that frequently, with the allowable expenses for travel and reimbursements on that, and people will use numbers that are actually coming from U.S. sites that aren't relevant. And I think that's applicable to across all industries, is making sure that you're getting information that's relevant to Canada and obviously relevant to the individual provinces, because we're out to, I guess, all across Canada right now. So making sure that you're getting content that is specific to your province and available to what you're doing.
Yeah, because even within incorporation, there's federal incorporations, provincial incorporations. If you're federally incorporated, do you need to provincially incorporate, depending on where you're doing the business? And those are the types of things that only a professional is going to know. And if you're getting that advice from your recruiter, I'm not going to say that they are 100% up to date on these changing things as well. Because what was, when I first started in the business almost 20 years ago, it's very different now as it was back then as to what the rules were for incorporation.
How did a 24-year-old start when they were 20 years ago?
I know, it's amazing. It's amazing. But But yeah, it's important just to make sure you're talking to the right people about that. And when it comes down to insurance, I'm sure people talk to you all the time about asking if you have insurance advice for them.
Yeah.
And are you an insurance broker?
No, and I can certainly talk to the tax implications of insurance, but insurance is got as much complexities as tax does, and making sure that you have the right product, you really need to speak to a professional about that. So we often refer people on to other people that can help with that. But maybe stepping back and talking a little bit about incorporation, because that is something that we see so many people do wrong. And I'd like to give you guys an opportunity to have my 2 cents on the matter. The most common mistakes that we see when setting up a corporation is, like you said, federal incorporation. Because when you go online, a federal incorporation appears to be cheaper than a provincial incorporation, because the government costs for that are cheaper, but it's misleading, because while the initial upfront cost is cheaper, as you mentioned, you have to then register in a province when you do a federal incorporation, which isn't a requirement when you do a provincial incorporation. And there's a cost to registering. And if you register every single year, in about 5 years, the cost of registration is going to bring you up to on par with a provincial
Do your
incorporation.
provincial one initially.
And that assumes that you've actually done your provincial registration, because we see very frequently people don't do this registration because they get a notice, they don't really understand it. They think it's a notice that I have to file a tax return, and they're not really sure what it means. So they don't do anything with it, which bothers me. When you see something you're not sure what to do with it, make sure you talk to someone. Don't just leave it in the corner. And it just doesn't get done, and then you get deregistered, and cost of re-registrations can be as much as the initial cost of setting up your business. So that's, even though you might be filing your taxes on time, and you might think that you're okay, if you haven't actually registered in the province, you're actually not okay, and you may be deregistered and might have to set up that corporation. So that's, the number one mistake that we see happen all the time. The other thing, as I mentioned before, is the way people set up their corporate structure. Is they usually just take the default and set up their corporate structure with one shareholder, common class of shares, it's usually themselves. And this is the most important aspect of your business, because if the share structure isn't set up correctly from day one, if you ever want to distribute dividends, you only have one class of shares. And while you might be able to have multiple shareholders of that class of shares, they have to be distributed equally amongst their shareholders based on their percentage of ownership. So if you have 2 shareholders who have 50-50 and you want to do a $100,000 dividend, then they each get $50,000. And this becomes really problematic when you have, let's say, a spouse who's not working and you want to do a dividend to them, but another spouse that is working, or children that are working, and you can't actually do the tax planning in the way that you had originally planned. So making sure that that's structured correctly, and understanding the difference between common shares and preferred shares, because the common shares are effectively the voting rights of the corporation. That's the person who owns the value of the business. And preferred shares are non-voting rights. And figuring out who should have preferred shares, who should have the common shares, is really important, again, for the long-term structure, because what we start looking at for that aspect is asset protection. Because if there are issues, there are risks around PSC, PSB, personal services corporation risk, personal service business risk. Have we structured it so that we've mitigated that risk to only the contractor who's on site versus the entire family? And we want to make sure that we've done our best to mitigate all the risks that we can, and structuring the corporation is a big part of that. So, I want to get off my soapbox now, but it's something that I think is important, and I would like to see everyone structuring it correctly. And if you're not sure, we're happy to have a look at your share structure and make sure that it's set up correctly, because it can be changed. Sometimes it's the easiest thing is, like I said, to close down the corporation and start a brand new one, because as you know, we do a special offer for all of the agencies that we work with, Procom being one of them, that we'll do an incorporation at cost for anyone that comes through Procom. So it's about $495, including a minute book and seal, your name search, your initial Form 1 and registration, all the stuff that you need to get set up and get structured correctly. Which brings in, I guess, some of the other common mistakes that we see is minutes. You are required to keep minutes of your business, particularly the initial minutes that indicate who owns the shares. And if you go online and do your articles of incorporation for the government, all you're getting is your articles of incorporation. You're not getting all the other pieces that you really need to have, like a minute book and seal, which, while technically optional, is something that we see garners a huge level of respect when you're dealing with a CRA audit, because it shows a level of professionalism, it shows a level of organization that if you just have your minutes and everything sort of scattered around willy-nilly, it just inspires the auditor to dig deeper. And what we want to do, if God forbid we ever get audited, is to have as much information available to the auditor as clean and make their life easy so that they can get in and get out as quickly as possible and not feel like they need to dig deeper.
Well, let's face it, if you don't have a minute book, you likely don't have minutes just lying around either. Those
Absolutely.
minutes are probably not anywhere.
Yes, and we see that time and time again, and that can again get you into hot water because no one's asking for them, right? It's not, you don't need them to file your tax return, but if you get audited and they ask you for your minutes, you're like, oh, I didn't create them. You created a situation here that, if you've got a good accountant, might be able to get you out of it, but if you're dealing with CRA on your own, you put your foot in your mouth pretty quickly.
And I'm assuming if you're setting up a corporation for an individual, you're keeping them up to date on changes, you're also alerting them to things where they may have to register again or provide any type of filings. You're keeping them abreast of when those things are happening and when they need to be getting in contact with you. So there's little reminders. Everyone has a busy life, that's for sure.
Absolutely, and this is one of the things that we're struggling with as an organization too, because historically we've done a lot of these reminders through email, which everyone is finding, myself included, that this is becoming overwhelming. So we're actually looking to do more into SMS messaging and try to deliver these really important messages to people in ways that they'll actually get. Because the last thing you want to do is miss a deadline because you haven't sorted through your emails.
Absolutely. I mean, I think everybody gets way too many emails and you're like, oh, this is just another marketing campaign from somebody, and you've just actually missed your filing date for something.
Absolutely, and unfortunately, because we use a CRM system to manage everything, so we can see whether people are opening or not. And all too often we see that people haven't opened a lot of their emails, and we'll go back to them like, oh yeah, I just haven't had a chance to get to it. I wasn't sure whether it was important or not. So at least we actually have the opportunity now, in ways that we didn't have before, to be able to track that communication and see whether people are opening it. So it does give us a level to be that reminder. And some people love to be reminded, like every single day, and some people are like, just leave me alone, I know what I have to do. And again, we sort of give our clients that opportunity to tell us, how frequently do you want to be reminded? How do you want to be
reminded? I mean, we struggle with this even internally. How do you, like, when you're running your own campaign, how do you keep people engaged, and how do you figure out how they want to hear from you?
Yeah, it's a tricky subject, right? Because especially when we do try to put out, as both of us do, try to put out other additional value-added stuff over and above just the meat of, like, you've got to do your taxes. So sometimes that's a win because the clients love the value. Sometimes it can be a loss because there's so much content there that they're not sure which is.
Yeah. I'm looking for my one email every year from Andrew that I have to file my taxes, not the other
value-added stuff.
The other 10 emails that are telling me, hey, maybe I want to look at this. Maybe this is a write-off I want to consider.
Yeah.
I should be thinking about my TFSAs. I should be thinking about this. And they forget the most important one.
Absolutely. So call out to those of you that are watching, particularly my clients. Maybe you can tell me what's working and what you'd like to see different, because communication and feedback is what helps us to succeed. So if you can tell us what you like and what you'd like to see, we're definitely open to adapting and moving, because that's a big part of being a small business, is how you pivot, how you adapt, how you react.
Absolutely. And so obviously some of the things that we wanted to talk about are those other people on your team. And so Andrew's given his pitch on, obviously from an accounting standpoint, how that's really important. We also obviously feel it's really important that you have a legal representation on your team, because it's not just your contracts that they're reviewing, although that can be, if there's things that are coming through from a contract standpoint, some are very templated contracts that come, some are short, some are long, but other times there's non-disclosure agreements, and sometimes you're getting legal letters from other people, and it's important to know what those are, how those impact your incorporation or your small business, whether you're a sole proprietor, and how you might need to protect yourself.
Absolutely, and I mean, I know that I've worked with Procom. I know that you guys have had your contracts vetted. They've gone through lawyers. They've gone through accountants. But that's not always the case with every organization, especially some of the smaller organizations. And what we have seen in the past is someone will take a contract that was intended for an employee and just rework it for a contractor, and they've left in a lot of clauses in there that are going to make you put you at risk for being deemed a PSB, PSC, and your contract is probably the number one thing that it is black and white as far as what has been documented, and you may not realize that some of the literature and some of the verbiage has basically deemed you to be an employee, and I have some insight on that, but really that's got to be a lawyer that's got to review that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the clauses that I think always comes up is it says, obviously we are indemnify ourselves against paying CPP and EI for an incorporated person, and say, hey, if you're ever audited, it's on you. People are like, well, I don't want that responsibility, and
Well,
I'm like, no,
you
but
need
that's
to have that
you need to have that responsibility. So if you're seeing a contract that doesn't include that, and you're saying that you're an incorporated entity and the employer or the agency of record is not taking that responsibility, like not indemnifying themselves, you've put yourself into a situation that's fairly precarious.
Yeah.
If there's no if you're getting termination and severance in your contract as an incorporated individual, that's also a problem. Again, we all, if something happens and, everybody would love that, but, as an incorporated individual, you also have to take risk in your business.
Absolutely.
And
You can't play both sides of the fence here.
yeah, you can't want all the great clauses of an employee, but get all the benefits of an incorporated contractor. So it's, as an individual worker, I get it, but as a business and an incorporation, you can't want to strike all those clauses out. You can't want to strike out non-solicitation and non-competition, like the non-compete clauses, because again, there's risk that you need to assume as a contractor, and if none of those things are in your contract, because it's a one-page contract, you really set yourself up for risk, and a lawyer can tell you that.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're right, is sometimes you might, as a layman, be trying to eliminate all the risk that's on your side and try to put it back on the end client or the agency, and not recognizing that to be a true independent contractor, one of the big criteria is your risk for profit or loss. And if there's no risk for profit or loss, you probably are an employee, not an independent contractor.
Yeah, like if you're guaranteed all your income and no matter what happens, and you're going to get a severance package at the end, and we're going to indemnify you from any type of risk from the government, you're an employee.
Yeah. Well, and unfortunately, one of the problems that's been out there too is that some people have tried to play both sides of the fence, and they've tried
Right.
to go after EI. And the problem with this is, I mean, this is damaging to the entire industry. It really is a massive, massive risk, because if the end clients are seeing people try to play both sides of the game, they're not going to play ball, right? And that destroys the entire opportunity. And as we all know, it really is a win for everybody involved. We've got a win for the agency, a win for the contractor, a win for the end client, because of all the benefits that we're seeing out of being an independent contractor, having a flexible workforce. And some people may not recognize the risk or the damage that they're doing to the entire industry by trying to play unfair, by trying to get the most
Right.
for themselves. And Canada is very unique in our independent contracting market. We've seen in the States it's all but dried up because of the way that they changed the
Right.
rules. We've seen in Europe it's all but dried up because of the way that the rules are. And if we value this industry, we need to protect it.
So we have a question. Do you guys want to take them now? Or?
Yeah.
Sure.
So Margaret would like to know, how do you find companies that provide liability insurance?
I guess Joe is probably
Yeah,
the
so-
best organization that I would refer to. LMS ProLink. So
Yeah, LMS ProLink, and they've been vetted by the APCC, which is an association for the professional contractor, and the insurance they provide definitely provides ample coverage. It's very reasonably priced for what the type of coverage you get. Again, you probably want to speak to LMS ProLink because as Andrew says, everyone's individual circumstances is a little bit different, but LMS ProLink can guide you towards that best insurance for you. But it is very reasonable compared to because they also understand our market,
yeah.
which, similar to Andrew, he understands what it means to be an IT contractor in this marketplace. LMS ProLink has also serviced this industry for decades, have been through all the different changes that have happened in the industry, and can provide the best coverage for you based on the role that you're holding at a client site, to make sure that you have the best coverage. Depending on what you're doing, maybe you need more coverage than another person. just based on the role that you're holding at the client site and the amount of responsibility that you're gonna have, or the type of work that you do could cause more damage at a potential client site, which puts you potentially at more risk.
Well, and I also love the way LMS has structured their errors and omissions coverage, the way it basically extends out to contractors and makes it affordable, because a lot of people may not realize that these plans exist that are affordable,
Right.
that are dollars a month instead of hundreds of dollars a month, because the problem with in the past has been that it's so expensive. And also understanding the benefits of having errors and omission, again, coming back to this risk and profit or loss, if you're insuring against a risk, that defines that there is a risk, otherwise, why are you insuring against it?
And that's one of the things, the LMS ProLink insurance is very reasonable in comparison to what you would get out in the market if you went out to go get it. It would be hundreds, so thousands of dollars a year.
Mhm.
And the LMS ProLink basic offering is hundreds of dollars a year. So it's a huge saving. Plus, I'm guessing it's also a write-off.
Yeah, it's a deduction. Errors and omission, 100% deductible. There is some differences in different types of insurance.
Right.
Life and disability are treated differently. I'm going to get geeky on you for a second and talk about tax, because it is worthwhile for people to understand how they're treated. Errors and omission health benefits for your employees and yourself are 100% deductible. Life insurance is one of the things that's specifically disallowed by the Income Tax Act, but there is a way to structure things, and again, LMS would be aware of some of these strategies, that if you set up the corporation as the beneficiary, you can pay for it with money that's been taxed at the corporate tax rate versus money that's been taxed at your personal tax rate. So we're talking 15% versus 50%, depending on your tax bracket. So there can be some significant savings if you set it up correctly from day one. Disability is a little bit different still. Disability is the one insurance that we recommend people don't deduct, because the way disability works is if you claim the expense as a deduction, then when you receive the benefit becomes taxable. So because, God forbid, if you need to make a claim, we want you to have access to as much of that money as possible. It's one of the very few deductions that we don't recommend you take, even though you could if you chose to.
Well, it's the same even if you're an employee in a corporation. Generally, most employers will set it up that you're paying for your disability, your long-term disability
Yourself. Yeah.
For that very reason, is that the difference between being taxed and not taxed, so you get more value out of the dollars that are available to you.
Exactly, and disability can be expensive too. So by paying for it personally, you don't need as much of a payout because you're not going to be paying tax on it, which actually means that the premiums are going to be lower too. So it can actually be a win on bringing down that cost rate.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, we're recommending that you should be talking to an insurance provider. We recommend speaking to LMS ProLink because they are aware of the work that you do. And like anything, when we say talk to a specialist, you want to talk to somebody who's a specialist in your industry, because you're not going to go to the eye doctor for your knee pain. Because although he's a doctor, he doesn't actually know anything about what you do or what's wrong with you, and can't really provide you the right fix for your problem. So it's important to do research about the people that are specialists in your industry, to make sure that you're not just getting any lawyer, you're not just getting any accountant or any insurance provider, because it may end up costing you more in the long run, because they're trying to learn about your industry and what's going to protect you the best. Whereas when you deal with people that are experts in your industry, in staffing or in working with people who work as contingent workers, they already have that knowledge and can apply all that learnings they've had from all the other people they've worked with. Andrew can tell you, these are things that are likely going to get you audited.
Mm-hmm.
These are things, you're well on the side of, we've done thousands of income tax returns like this, and these have not red flagged. You can try that. It's red flags, people, but try it.
At your own risk.
At your own risk. So Andrew will tell you what's going to get you on that audit list and what's not. So where do you want to sit on that line? And that's the same with your insurance providers, your lawyer. And again, people reach out to me from different fields all the time about recruiting advice. And I'm like, to be honest, I work in the IT industry, and I can tell you, other IT things that work within IT. You want to have your resume set up a certain way. You want to include this information. There's some things that are carte blanche across everybody, but somebody who's looking for a digital marketing role is going to have a very different looking resume than somebody who's a project manager trying to get a job at a bank. And there's a different look and feel to what's acceptable in those two areas. And so you want a recruiter that's a specialist in that, because they're going to be able to get you the better contracts. They're going to be the people that are going to help you set up your resume the best way possible to get success.
Because they're dealing with the clients all the time. They know what the clients are looking for, and obviously knowing and understanding the specific client, not even the industry that you're going on, but the specific client that you're applying for, and what the hiring manager is looking for. Having that insight, that level of insight, is priceless.
Absolutely. And I mean, there are some things, in social media that are going to be the same. How you set up your LinkedIn profile, and what picture should I use, and where should I put certain things. Those things you can get from most recruiters, because we're fairly well versed in a lot of those social media things. But there are people that make their whole living off social media, and going on a social media course, for an afternoon. There's people out there that offer these trainings. There's lots of online stuff offered. Take part in it. Get involved. Take part in groups that can help you stay engaged in what's relevant, because that's the other part of running your own business, is keeping relevant, keeping up to date on a lot of the changes that are happening.
Absolutely. And in fact, call out and ask for you guys. If you know anyone who's great at Instagram, give me a call, because I need some help on that right now.
I do. I have somebody for you.
Excellent. I love that, because that's one of my new areas of focus, because, obviously it's evolving. As accountants, we're probably a little late to the game. I know lots of people have been on Instagram for a while. It took me a while to get onto Facebook even, but, it's about adapting, evolving, getting better, and that's, I think, universal.
Yeah, and as a small business, it's hard, because you're not only are you out there creating your own income, creating your own revenue stream, but you still have to run your business on the side, and it takes additional work to do it. And having that right team is so important, that you can call on people for, someone told me I needed this, who can I go to? And being able to call on those people when you need them. And I think that also involves your family and friend network as well.
Absolutely.
And we haven't really talked about them, but within your social network, you have other people that you can rely on to give you advice.
Yeah, or refer you on to someone that they know that they can trust and they've worked with. A referral is the best source of advice that you can get, that even if it's just to direct you on to someone that they've worked with in the past that they can trust. I think going through your network's a huge part of that. And I am going to try and seal it back, back to the accounting for a second, because one thing we haven't really touched base on is setting your business up for success and actually getting your business organized. We talked a little bit about having a website and having these team of advisors and how you incorporate. But all too often what I see happen with independent contractors, they go on the contract's set up, the corporation's been structured correctly, they've seen a professional, they've done that right, so that's good. They start the contract and they don't do anything until a year later, and it's time to do their taxes, and they're like, okay, I guess I better go through that pile of receipts that I have sitting under my bed or in my glove box or whatever the case might be. And I really want to encourage you guys to get onto some system. I don't even really care what system it is, but getting onto some system right away. Because if you can get into a process of doing your accounting and bookkeeping on a regular process, and as an independent consultant, you are running a business, you need to manage that business. If you can get into that process on a regular basis, it's easy, it's not overwhelming. You're not looking at a year's worth of information. Because what happens is if you wait a year, you get to it, and it's the end of the year, and it's daunting, and you've got other commitments. Maybe timing is around Christmas, and you've got other things that you'd rather focus on. And now, next thing you know, you've left it for a few more months, and then it's three more months later, and you're feeling overwhelmed, and so you bury it again and deal with another issue. Next thing you know, you're a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road, and I see it all the time. And the number one thing is to get a process and get a system set up from day one. I'm obviously a huge believer in these cloud-based technologies. And again, I've got this special discounts available for you guys right now, and feel free to message me if you're interested. But getting onto a cloud-based system where you can link in your bank statement, you can link in your credit card, and that information can flow in automatically, and then all you have to do is categorize it to the appropriate account. And these systems can learn. They've got artificial intelligence now, or machine learning, and so they know from your past behavior. They know that you've coded Tim Hortons to Meals and Entertainment. They know that you've coded Staples to office supplies. So when that information flows in, it's actually going to bubble up a suggestion for you. So that all you have to do is approve it. It makes it really easy. as opposed to the old school having to go through your receipts and type those up even into a tape or into an Excel spreadsheet or whatever the case might be. It's now so easy to do if you get set up from day
Something
one.
simple you can do in front of the game on the TV.
Absolutely, and for the sole proprietors out there, Intuit just came out with a new product called QuickBooks Self-Employed, and I can't wait for some of the features in QuickBooks Self-Employed to come into QBO, which I'm sure they will, but it's been designed from the ground up to be mobile first. So everything is based on your phone, and it's got a sort of Tinder-esque feature where you swipe left for business and right for personal,
Oh, nice.
which I think is really, I mean, it's...
Speaks to a generation.
Yeah, exactly, it does. But that's the thing is we know as independent businesses, as small business owners, that there's a lot of commingling of business and personal, so that they've thought that through and recognized that that's one of the first decisions we need to make is it business or personal, and then if it's business, how do we classify it within there? And they've got mileage trackers now, which are amazing, that literally you don't do anything, you get in a car and you go on a drive and it goes beep beep, you've driven X amount of kilometers, is this business or personal? So, there's lots of great functionality that's coming. That's a huge win for sole proprietors. I know that's eventually going to be coming into the QB product. It's not there today.
It's because it's an older system, and we all know trying to rebuild it to be mobile first is more difficult when it's already pre-built.
Absolutely, but I know I know that from the organization that is an important drive for them. In fact, I just did. I don't know if you saw that immersive video I did.
I
with
did,
them,
yes.
which was really cool. Intuit to produce. If anyone from Intuit's watching, thank you for doing that. So I know that their mobile first is really important for them. But like you said, is when you've got an established product with 1 million users, and they literally have. I think they're coming up on 2 million users now on QuickBooks Online. That's an established system. It's not that easy to be mobile
But that's
first.
what keeps us all employed,
Yeah.
is that they need more IT people
Absolutely.
to build this product out.
Yes. So hopefully Intuit, if you're watching, you should be contacting Procom and
Yeah,
getting the
exactly.
best consultants on your projects.
Exactly. And so I think that really covers most of the people that you need to have on your team. You need those people, you need, as we've said, like you need your accountant to help you in the initially and throughout the process. You need a tool to keep yourself organized and get set up. You need a lawyer. And again, we're not talking you need a full-time lawyer on your team. You need somebody who you can call that can advise you on contracts to make sure you're protecting yourself from risk, but you're also allowing risk into your contracts so that you're protecting your overall business. And a lawyer is a good person to have on your team because as you're starting, we all set up our businesses and we change as we go through life as well. So, when we were all, in our early 20s, no one thought about having a will. Definitely no one thought about having a will for your company.
Mm-hmm.
But these are all things that are important as you continue to grow. You continue to have more assets in both your company and your personal side of your business. It's important to protect that.
Absolutely.
And so there's probably a lot of people sitting out there right now that have money in their company and money in their personal life that's not protected by any type of will, and that can only cost you money or your family money in taxation and debt later on.
Estate planning is one of the biggest, hottest things that we're seeing right now. So this, obviously, we were talking about setting up your business for success. I think this is applicable to people who have been in business for a while as well, is setting up yourself to succeed, maybe not because you've been running a business for a while, but you can still set yourself up for success, not only for yourself, but for the generations coming behind you. And so we're seeing that as a big, really important factor right now, as we're seeing, the community is aging up. People are now starting to look beyond their lifetime and to how things are going to be structured for their family in the long run. And having a lawyer is a really important part of that. Wills and estates is definitely an area that you can focus on.
Yeah, and it's something you should start thinking about early on. And I think a lot of people,
the earlier the better.
I think a lot of people start to think about it as, you start to have kids or you start to get later in years. It's really important to start this stuff, when you're setting up your company, to start it early. You can always change it, but start it early so that it's already in place and you're revising it. But again, a lawyer can provide you the best advice whether or not you need a will for your company, a personal will. you know, and then obviously you get married and that changes again,
Yeah.
and how does that change in both situations for your company as well as your personal life? And then you also want to have good recruiters on your team. I mean, we believe we have a great team of recruiters here at Procom, but again, depending on what your specialty is, there might be better organizations out there that are also looking after your specific industry. In IT, we are definitely the experts in there with a broad client base. And with that comes not just finding you a role, but helping to provide you advice on your resume, providing you interview coaching tips, providing you, you know, information on like, you know, how to set your rate appropriately, helping to find you those experts that can definitely help you with some of your questions. But then you also need those periphery people, like people to help you with your social media, people to help you set up a website. And then you need your friend network. And that your friend network is also a great network to find you jobs. Because they're also out there working as well, but some of those people have a lot of skills in some of these other things as well.
Absolutely.
And anything else to add?
No, I think we've hit on everything. I guess that's probably everything.
Yeah. Is there any more questions, Courtney? Okay, so we'll wrap it up for this month, and we'll see you again next month. Have a great March break for everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.